Welcome everyone to today's live session. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. Today we are going to be using rows forms to log data. So before we start, if you are going to be building along, it's best if you sign into your rows account and just open up a brand new spreadsheet. And if you have any questions during this whole process, just drop a line in the chat, or you can just speak up, say, hey, I have a question. Please feel free to ask any questions. We're here to help. We want you to learn. So yeah, don't be shy.
Yeah.
Next, oh wait, actually, I forgot one thing. So I'm going to introduce the team. So in case you don't know who we are, my name is Ray. I work in community at Rose, and we have Saurabh, who is the no-code builder here at Rose, and we have Adrian, who is our customer success manager. So now that you know who we are, you're probably wondering, what is Rose? Rose is the first true spreadsheet with built-in integrations and a slick sharing experience. And Saurabh, why don't you quickly show them what we mean when we say built-in integrations?
Oh, for sure. And thanks, Ray, for actually making all of this happen. Thanks for scheduling and arranging for this amazing community live building session. All right, so when it comes to our integration, I'm just going to make it quick and brief. Essentially, what this means is inside a spreadsheet, as soon as you open our editor, you can go to the small, nice little icon on the format bar, click on the integrations icon, and it'll open up a panel. And there, right here, you'll have a list of different integrations that we currently enable. So for instance, if you had to, let's say, use Twitter, you can click on it, connect your Twitter account, and you should instantly be able to access a bunch of different functions. So that's essentially what our built-in integrations would look like.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So today's session, building forms using rows to log data. Why would you want to use rows forms? Well, you could use rows forms to create a tool if you want to collect and log some information. And instead of having it across a bunch of different tabs, a bunch of different tools or different platforms, you can have them all in one place. So today we are going to do something a little different than what we normally do during our live sessions. Today we've decided to do a bit of a back and forth. So we've created a bit of a scenario. So Saurabh is going to be the teacher, and Adrian is going to be someone who wants to create a tool, and he's going to give the information to Saurabh and tell him what exactly he wants to build, and hopefully ask a lot of the questions that you may or may not be thinking, but maybe you're too shy to say it, who knows? But we're hoping to ask a bunch of these questions for you. If you do have a question that comes up, please do feel free to message in the chat or just speak up. So without further ado, I will throw it over to you, Saurabh and Adrian.
All right, thanks again, Ray. All right, so let's dive in. So I am on my editor for folks who are trying to build along. It's okay, just go ahead and create a new spreadsheet the way I did. We also have a very live, very real scenario that Adrian has in mind, which we'd like to share in terms of how we want to build and for what reason we'd want to build a form in rows. So Adrian, thanks for joining us. I know it's about a little at the evening side, but please tell us about the kind of use case or the scenario that you want us to build using rows.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So what I've been discussing with client before is a way to log data into rows based on the input of different people, of different users. And one use case that I thought was interesting was to set up the collection of RSVPs for a company event. So in this case, now we're in October, so a lot of companies are looking at Christmas dinners and Christmas events. So they wanted to know how they could send a form to their employees and ask them to tell them if they wanted to attend to that event, and if so, with which information. So for example, we'd want to have the name of the people who want to attend, the email address, of course, potentially even the phone number if they want to. Generally, they will contact by email, but it could be by SMS as well. For example, in a case of a Christmas event, there will be food. So what are their dietary restrictions, if they have any allergies or things like this? So maybe a little space for the people to note what they need to say. And let's say that, for example, that year the budget was quite good, so they allowed people to bring a +1, their significant other or whoever they want to bring. So they'd want to know that as well in order to be able to schedule the right number of seats and tables.
Nice. All right, that's a pretty interesting use case and very detailed. And I'm hoping it's a lot common that we all think it would be, right. I could imagine a lot of companies trying to sort of share a form, even for other kind of surveys and so on and so forth. And to be honest, I was hearing you, and while I was hearing, I figured why not just go ahead and cook something up on the go. So here are a couple of things that I started doing, right? So first, I actually renamed the sheet to a little bit more something that is relatable. So I hope it's Christmas Day. Feel free to change that perhaps later on. And since it's a party list of people, I have created a form with all of these input parameters, or rather the data that you're expecting to collect from a whole bunch of these employees. And I am guessing you'd want all of this data. Let's say anybody who's filling in these forms, the data should start sort of logging one below the other, perhaps on a separate table. Is that what's sort of expected, or
definitely? Ideally, like some kind of spreadsheet where we have all the information, and then you can send emails, mass emails, or SMS, or that kind of things.
Amazing. All right, so that's something which is pretty cool. And now, so let me show you some of the rows magic that you can do now that we are at this stage, right? So the first thing I would love to introduce is essentially what we have as an action element, which is the input field. An input field is something you can, again, essentially access by going to this format bar. You have this checkbox, which is for action elements. You can click that, and you'll find an input field option right here. Now, let me show you what an input field does, in case you're wondering, right? So if you think of this as essentially a live form, I can actually show this to you as well. You can toggle between the live or the published app of ours versus on the editor as well. So let's say once you do
what's that exactly, the live mode? Like, is it to share the spreadsheet?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. So I would imagine that if you want to share this with your team, you may not want to give them the access to, let's say, edit any of these fields or access and view a whole bunch of other data. I would imagine all you'd really want to do is just share the form bits of it. And particularly, you'd only want them to edit or rather input the data on specific fields as opposed to the entire table.
And that's why you put the input field instead of a normal cell, right? So that they can interact with it.
Absolutely. And you can even, when you're building the workflow, you can also test this in the live mode by just clicking on the live. And at this stage, nobody else is actually able to access this particular sheet. Only you can actually access it. Don't worry about it. If publicly sharing data, that should not be a concern. And here, if I just click if you bring your cursor here, let's say I start typing it in, you can see I can edit the cell, but I cannot edit any of the other, let's say, tables or even cells that's right about here. So that's essentially what an input field allows us to do. And that's one of the beauties of working at Rose. Now that's the input field. All I really need to do is just, let's say, drag it. I would drag it to all the way down to, let's say, B5. And the reason I've kept B6 blank is I would imagine, again, this would be rather a binary question, wouldn't it?
Definitely,
like it's a yes or no. Yeah. All right. So what I would recommend is we have a checkbox as opposed to an input field. So once again, you can actually access a checkbox from our action elements right here. You can just go ahead and click on it, and you'll find a small, nice little checkbox available. When somebody clicks on it, it would go to a quote unquote true state. Otherwise, that by default, it stays false, which means a no, if you will, right? So far, this is how you can essentially, let's say, I'm hoping this sort of brings out the kind of layer or the structure that you might be thinking. In case you have something that you would want to ask, feel free.
That looks good. If all that data gets logged, yeah, that would be very useful.
Great. All right. So once we are up until this stage, we have a little bit of the layout of our form sort of looking okay. The next thing, and let me just preface this by saying, the next step could be a little tricky for people who may not have already been sort of working with rows, or perhaps a little bit of more technical side of things. But don't worry, we are going to try and simplify this and explain as far as possible. So as for next steps, what we need to do is basically convert this data, this range of data, which is in all of these rows, into a JSON format, and then use that JSON data and then start logging the information.
What's the JSON?
Right. So in this case, the way I would rather want to express this is with the help of JSON data, if you could imagine, right? Like currently this data is all in rows, but what we really want is each of these data points need to go in their independent columns. What I mean by that is, I suspect you'd want the first name, last name, email, phone number, etc., to be there, right? Independent columns. And not just that, let's say if I have some dummy demo data available here, this is all just my random information, and maybe I wouldn't bring +1 for this particular party. So the values from right here, I would suspect you'd want this on independent row. So I would have my own row. So would you, perhaps Ray, and so on and so forth. Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'm hoping. Right. All right. So in order to make that happen, the best way to do that is with JSON, because JSON allows us to sort of wrangle the data in this particular way. And we also have a very nice little function that allows us to do this very quickly, very efficiently. And it's also called just range to JSON. And as literally as it says, it allows us to identify all the headers, which is essentially going to be the first row of your, let's say, the log table, and then the data associated with that header. In this case, that would be the input parameters or the input values that users would enter. So for now, if you, let's say, just go ahead and do that, I'm hoping this visualized version of what JSON means gives a little more context. So you can click on this.
Right. So if I understand correctly, you're building pairs of this data, and then you're kind of storing it in that cell until you can do something else with it.
Absolutely. That's essentially what's happening right now. Inside a single cell, you have these keys and value and paired together. And that's essentially what makes up a JSON data format. So if you could imagine, like, first name, last name, email are the keys, or in our case, it would go as the headers in the log table, and all the other values are essentially your row value altogether. So Sora would be one row. Yeah, and so on and so forth.
So how do we get them now to display on the log table?
Absolutely. So that's the next best thing. We at Rose have built some very nice internal proprietary functions. So in this case, this hopefully should be easier for anybody to get at. Is what we really need is an insert, which is essentially to say, I want to take this data, which is the JSON data from, let's say, a cell above, and put it onto a destination. Now, a destination in our case is essentially going to be the number of, let's say, the header values as part of what we have in our input table. What I mean by that is we have first name, last name, email, phone, dietary restrictions, and bringing +1. That's 6 individual, let's say, data points. And those are the set of headers we need and not more. So in this case, all I really need to do is select from A1 to F1, hit enter, give it a second, and bam, there you have the data. So,
impressive. Yeah. But then I'm wondering, because like now we took the data, we put it in the JSON thingy, and then we put it in the log table. But can't we just skip that step and just take the whole range, A and B column, and just put them in the log? What would happen if we do that?
Well, you could try that, and that's something which is very nicely, easily doable. Had the data been in that particular format already. So in this case, if you can imagine, right, you're kind of transposing that entire data set from a row by row format to a rather column by column format, right? And that's essentially one of the reasons why we need JSON, and then need to sort of set up a destination from where the data needs to start flowing. I hope that sort of,
to be able to change the displaying.
Yeah, absolutely. And as part of next step, we can also introduce another action element of ours, which is a button. I don't suppose you get to use buttons a lot, but that's what we would need to sort of make this happen.
Why do we need a button? It can't just stay like this, like they put the data and it just brings it down?
Well, it could. One of the challenges without sort of having a control of sorts, if you're thinking about a form, right? So imagine if somebody just does Adrian, right? Let's say, I'm typing it in right here. The moment I hit enter, this is how spreadsheets
right.
work, which is, your cells that are governing the other functions will just automatically be triggered the moment you change these input parameters or the input values, right? So the moment I enter the value, you can see another insert was triggered, and we don't want that. And a button would essentially allow us to control that factor where, only once somebody has entered all the data and they're sure that they want to submit the data, only then they can press a button and the data would be submitted, right? All right. So what I'm going to do, well, first, let's actually prepare some of the things, right? So in this case, I'm going to nest the range to JSON, which is essentially creating the JSON part and the insert part in a single cell reference. That just makes life a lot easier when working on a spreadsheet. So I'm just going to copy the range to JSON function and replace the C3, or rather nest this range to JSON inside our insert function. So let me just hit enter. It's okay. It's creating another insert right now. I'm also now going to sort of beautify this and rather delete the C3 part of it.
Do we have a way actually to hide completely the formula, like the C4, so that people don't see it?
Yeah, that's one of the other beautiful things about the new button that we have. So let's say I'm going to copy this function. And let's say I'm going to put my button at P7. So I'm going to go ahead and create button, which is something you can also, once again, access via the input elements that we have here, the action elements that we have here. I'm going to click that drop down, click on the button, and it opens up a side panel. And you now have a guided approach on how you can go about creating a button. So in our case, I'm going to label this submit. Because that's perhaps one of the most common names for a button. And as part of an action, I want to execute a custom formula. And this would be the same formula that we created in C4. So I'm just going to put an equals, paste the function that I copied from the previous step. So this function right here, it's an insert, which actually takes, or rather, the range to JSON is creating a bit of a JSON here. And the insert function takes that JSON and adds it to the destination.
So how does the system knows that it has to do the range to JSON first? It's always from the inside out?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So once the way this would work is it would first evaluate the most internal function that we have. Whatever value it generates is what impacts the functions which are outside of it. That's the beauty of nesting functions on a spreadsheet. So in this case, this is our insert formula. I'm just going to go ahead and say create a button. Now that we have a button, I'm going to once again delete the C4 because we no longer actually need it anymore.
Nice.
And this is how you can actually hide the insert. There are no auxiliary functions to actually do anything. The button takes care of it all. And to give you a quick demo, right? Let's say now that we are here, I'm going to delete this because this was just me sort of nesting two functions. Let's say I'm going to change it to your name, and let's say change it here. And as you can see, the moment I change it, the data is actually not being entered right away because all of this is being controlled by the button. It would only sort of be inserted if I were to submit with the button. So do you have any dietary restriction that I should be aware of? Do we need to enter it? Or
yeah,
really?
Let's put seafood allergy, yeah.
All right, seafood allergies. Good call. Would you be bringing a +1 for this Christmas party? All right. Okay, I'm going to check that. And now I hit submit, and bam, there you go. You have Adrian. That's your row altogether.
Cool.
Yeah.
What does it look like for the users?
Of course. So now, once again, if you want to toggle between, what it looks like externally versus to you, you can click on the live button right there. And this is what it looks like right now.
Nice. So the only downside there is that they can access the log, right? And we don't necessarily want them to see like the dietary restriction of other people and the phone numbers, etc. Can we hide the log?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Well, the hiding columns and rows, I would say would be the obvious reflex here. I can totally imagine it. And I suspect we should have this, hopefully in the near future. We don't have this functionality right away. Right now, we should. However, to your ask, what I would rather do here is we have this nice little toggle, which is to say it allows you to keep a table visible on live or hide it. You can just click it once and you'll see that the eye would be slashed out, which would indicate that it is now hidden on live mode. And we don't really have to imagine because we can actually witness this live. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the live button again. And now you can see that this is what the end user would see.
All right, pretty good.
Right?
I think
All right.
when I was watching the log, if you can come back to the log, like we would see that you logged twice with your email address. And I thought like probably in the team, they'll probably end up submitting multiple times their own stuff. Could we limit it so that they cannot do duplicates? Like if they make a mistake, they can always email the person in charge of this and they'll change it.
Gotcha. Well, why don't I actually take care of both of those things, right? So one is the issue of duplicate entries, and the other is if people want to resubmit the form, would they be able to do that as opposed to sending an email? So the answer to this particular conundrum would be with our, let's say, the insert function. So let me just open the button once again, which you can do by clicking the gear icon inside the button itself. And once you click it, the panel opens up. And here is where you can once again witness the insert function. So similar to insert, we have a bunch of its variations available. Some of the other variations are, for example, the overwrite. Now, the overwrite function, as the name suggests, would essentially replace everything in the destination. Basically, it'll delete everything and keep adding any new information that you throw at it, which is not what is something that you want here.
Definitely not.
Rather, right? Yeah. I would recommend, my personal favorite is the update function, because with the update function here, once again, it has sort of a similar schema, which is it has a similar input there, which is the JSON data, or the input, the data is something that you can enter as the first parameter. The second parameter is what is the key, no pun intended, because that's the unique identifier of a particular row that you can set to say, okay, let's say in this case, email is going to be the key which will identify if a row is unique or if a row already exists, or if I need to enter a new row. That's what our update function essentially is supposed to do. And we can plug this in our workflow in a very seamless fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the insert with an update. And what's missing here is our key. So I'm going to go there. And as you can see, it highlights the key parameter here. And for us, I hope it's okay if I'm choosing the email, or do you wish to choose? That makes sense? All right. So I'm going to choose key, and that's A3. And I'm going to say, make sure, save changes there. So now we're using an update, and let's test it out. So we already have your email here, and I also see that that's already logged here. Let's say you maybe no longer want to bring the +1. Perhaps that's an option, right? So I unchecked it and I hit submit once again, and you can see here the value changed from true to false. So that's doesn't create. So
it will avoid duplicates and allow them to update. So we can just tell them if you made a mistake, just submit it again.
Absolutely, that's definitely that's definitely a possibility. One of the other things, well, this is more of an optional thing, but I'm just thinking on the top of my head. Would you rather want to make sure some of these fields are mandatory, or that's potentially not something that you're really concerned about right now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we'd expect them to fill out the fields, but we want to make sure we have at least their names and email address. That would be necessary to fill it up. Yeah.
Gotcha. And thanks to the latest version of Button, by the way, we just launched another, a V2 version, if you will, of the Button this month. And these are some of the more nicer features that we have. So you can once again, click inside this gear icon, inside the button. We have a more options field available here. And you can now see that there's a set required cells toggle available too. So you can switch that on.
Easy peasy.
All right, nice. Yeah, that's pretty much And now once that we are here, you also have the option. So you can go as complex as you want. Like you may have a continuous range that you want filled. You may want to break some cells. Let's say you only want B2, B1 to B3, maybe not B4, but also B6, right? So you can even specify those. But I would suspect maybe for now, just the first
An
name,
email is
last name,
enough.
email.
We need to know like who's
Right?
coming. The rest is kind of accessory. Yeah.
Optionals. All right, there you go. So you have B1 to B3 selected. You can once again hit save changes. And let me show you what happens if, let's say, I skip one of these fields, right? And I try to hit submit, and there you go. You have a soft, well, it shows here, please fill the required cells. And you also have a soft alert right here, which also indicates, hey, please go ahead and fill this cell. So that's an, hopefully a handy little feature for you to make sure that you have the right sort of data flowing in.
Perfect.
Right. And well, I'm also thinking when sharing this with other people, right? So this is something which also comes up a lot. Like if you are wondering if people will override or see if somebody else is filling in this data, right? Because if you imagine, that's what would happen if you share the single link across your entire
the form to be empty every time, right?
Right. And which is why we have hopefully a very handy little toggle available. So right here where you have the name of this table, you can click on this small drop down icon. You'll have two options. One is for table, which is essentially, if you imagine, right, if you have a report that you're sharing, you have, let's say, a published list of investors or some kind of a report which is publicly available. I think for those kind of things which just doesn't require users to interact much with it, a table is a good bet. Forms rather are what we want here, because you'd want the form to be always empty, and every individual would have their own instance of the link and the app once they open it, right? So I'm going to switch this to the form mode, and I'm also going to go ahead and clear out all of these particular details. I'm going to undo so that the checkbox is there. I'm going to clear out all the other details. So this is essentially what your form would essentially look like. But I have a surprise for you, but I'm going to wait and see if you have any questions, and then I'm going to get to the surprise part of it.
All right, so it looks pretty good. It looks pretty simple. So now how would I share it? Would I just copy paste the link at the top and just send it to people, or?
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't recommend that, because this is still a sheet that you own, and you also have the log data here. I would rather be very, very careful and not share this link for even people who have access to the workspace. Right now, the next step would be, you have this small share option. So you can click on the share icon right there. And here we have two sets of options available for you. One is you can share this privately, which is to say anybody who has the link can access the live mode, which I suspect is honestly what you might want. The other option is also to publish this to the world, right? So imagine if you've created such an amazing workflow that you feel like others could benefit from as well, and you want to sort of templatize this or share it with somebody else so that other organizations can use. You could then choose this option. Because one of the features with the other publish to the world option is that others can even duplicate your particular workflow right here,
Okay,
which
so
I don't recommend.
They would have access to all the data in the sheet, right? If they
Yeah,
duplicate it.
Right. So I wouldn't recommend that for this workflow, but that's an option you can think about if you want to open this up for other folks. Yeah. So for now, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and enable this. So you have the option to share privately. This is the link that you can go ahead and share. So for instance, if I were to just open this up, of course, I'm logged in, so it wouldn't show much of a difference here. But let me just show you what a normal user would otherwise see. So this is essentially what they would end up seeing anyways. Yeah, so this essentially...
access it from anywhere, or is it better on a computer, or can I open it on other devices?
No, I'm glad you asked the question, and that was my surprise. Essentially, we do really cool, and let me just show you. So we do really cool on mobile as well. So this is what you could imagine the app would look like on a mobile device. So in case your employees are sort of opening it up on a mobile device, this is essentially what it would look like. They can enter the data right here, have easy access to sort of check and check these items here, hit submit, and that should be it. It looks, if you want to check out a bunch of other devices, that's also available. I'm going to go ahead and think iPad. I don't know. Yeah, so probably sort of zooms out a little bit there. And
It's
iPhone
fairly
X, this is what it looks like. Yeah, fairly so, right? So hopefully users should not have any issues when accessing it on multiple different devices. That shouldn't be a concern at all. But yeah.
Awesome.
There we have it.
Good.
Right. Okay. And perhaps since it's the season, I would say if you want to even make this look a little pretty, perhaps you have some of these formatting options. Feel free to go ahead, toggle them the way you want it. I'm just sort of changing these headers and the font a little bit. I'm really a design illiterate, so my design skills are like very, very bad. But of course, feel free to just choose with some of these options available here. Yeah, and sort of check it out on the live mode and see if it works out. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for the demonstration.
For sure, for sure. Well, since we have a little more time, let me just check. I have another couple tips I could share. Let's check in with Ray and perhaps our audience if anybody has any questions, anything they would like to ask, anything they'd love to know, any particular thing they need clarified. Happy to be able to address it.
While we wait to see if anyone posts any questions, so let's say you wanted to email the people on the list. Could you email them straight from Rose?
Absolutely, love that workflow. The short answer is, of course, yes. And here's how we can do this, right? And let's just see. No, I don't think there are any questions so far. Nobody. Oh,
not so far.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. So now that we have the email, potentially their first names and a bunch of other things, we can absolutely send emails. And there are a couple core components of sending an email. So let's try and create those components first before we actually get onto sending the email, right? So let's actually do that. The first component, of course, is the subject line. We can actually create perhaps a customized subject to everybody. We definitely also need the body of the email as well. Otherwise, a blank email doesn't seem right. So let's say if you want to personalize the subject, you can also do that. But for now, I'm just going to say Christmas confirmation. Let's do that. And for body, I'm going to sort of personalize this and say concatenate, which is essentially the function you could use to sort of join two or more data points. So in this case, I'm going to say hi, comma, the first name, and say perhaps comma, how's it going? I'm bad at test emails, I guess. But yeah, here you go. So that's the body, and it says hi, my first name, how's it going? So you can once you have this, you can essentially just drag this all the way down. You can see the body is customized to each of these individual row data. Once we have this, you can choose the email option once again by navigating to our integration. So there's this small icon right here. If you don't remember still, that's the action elements that we have. That's the function helper and the Sigma icon that we have here. You can click that, get into the integrations panel right here. And from this, I would choose the Gmail option because we are on Workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Go ahead and you can click the connect icon. It will take you to an OAuth or the consent screen. You just have to hit allow there, I think, a bunch of times. Log in if you haven't, enter your OTPs,
it will use my own Gmail account.
Absolutely, that will use your own Gmail account. And once you're connected, I already am in my. Oh, I am not actually. Doesn't say connected. I must have removed it. Let me just go ahead and do it anyways. Since we are here, let me go ahead and sign in, and let's see. Yeah, go ahead and allow it. That should be okay. Give it a couple of seconds, and yeah, you have this small confirmation. Done. Integration was connected. Now that we're connected, you can close the integration panel, go back to the cell, go back to that particular row, and just you can type equals Gmail. That's one of the ways by which you can actually send, or rather work with our functions. The alternative is to make use of our amazing function wizard. There's another features which we launched very recently, helps users navigate these functions, these complex functions, in a lot more simplistic way. So in case you're ever in doubt and ever in trouble, you can just go there. Once again, click on this icon, get into the function wizard, search for the Gmail option, although you have that here already. But I'm still going to go ahead and say Gmail, and you will see it's only filtering all Gmail related functions. I'm going to choose send Gmail option, and you have a whole bunch of criteria that you can use from right here. So the two in this case would be equals, and we use equals to indicate that we are referencing something or we are using a function or another formula, right? That's why we use the equals. So I'm going to say equals C2. That's my to email ID. We do have a subject line, so I'm going to enable that. So you can click on the toggle. It enables the subject parameter. Once again, type equals. My subject is sitting in G2. I'm going to set that. And finally, I have my content, the same thing, toggle on equal sign, and that's in H2. Once I do that, I can, of course, you have a bunch of other options. Feel free to explore them. There's BCC, reply to. I don't have the need for it right now, so I'm going to leave it as is. And once you're done, just hit OK there, and bam, that essentially triggers an email out of your array. If you need the ID just to keep track of what emails you're sending, you can of course have the data, but I don't need them right now, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. Once you have this, you can once again scroll, or just drag the functions all the way down, and an email will be triggered for every single user. So yeah, that's
awesome.
Essentially how you can send.
It saves actually a lot of time.
Right?
We can just put in the body the confirmation, hey, your input was recorded, see you at the Christmas dinner, and that's it.
Of course, that's an option. Yeah. But yeah, let's open up the forum and see in case anybody has any questions. How are we doing on time, Ray? Are we good? Did we overdo this?
You've got about 15 minutes left. So if there are questions, we can open up the floor. If there aren't any questions, that's also okay. Is there anything else that we could add to this that you could also do on this particular form?
Since we can send email, I don't imagine we can also send SMS.
We absolutely can, so long as you have an account with one of the integration partners that we have in here. So let me show that to you as well. Messaging, and there we have it. So you can, navigate to our integrations panel, switch to the messaging category,
for example.
Yeah, and we can do Twilio, MessageBird, InfoWeb. I think at some point SendGrid also had it, yeah, but SendGrid is rather for emails, not really for SMSs. So you have these three options. So long as you have an account with one of these, you could absolutely send an SMS. So and of course you can explore by clicking in. Go to the functions, and you can see, okay, there's one, the ability to send SMS using Twilio. In case you usually get an ID, a unique identifier, whenever you do trigger these kind of transactional output, you get a unique identifier. And if you want to check the status of that SMS, like whether it was delivered, whether it failed or whatnot, you can do that using the view SMS Twilio function as well. So you can absolutely send an SMS for sure.
Okay, cool. It looks like nobody has asked any questions in our chat. And that's fine. That's great. We hope you guys enjoyed our show today. We hope you enjoyed our session today. It was really great to have you here. Saurabh, if you don't mind putting up the last slide of our presentation. Yes, thank you. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any feedback on the session, please do feel free to email me, and that's ray.delarosa@rose.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn under Rose HQ. And you can also join our Discord community, which is amping up quite nicely. If you have any questions about any spreadsheet problems, basically general spreadsheets, not just rows, we're there to help. You can also share what you've created, and it's a nice group of people, so it'd be great if you could join us. And you can also catch us on Twitter at RoseHQ. Thank you once again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.